All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Frederick. I'm an English teacher, and that's my friend Tony. He's a native speaker, English native speaker. So first of all, as I said, I'm a teacher. That's my friend Tony. A question for you: why are you here in Ukraine?
Well, I'm here for my wedding. I was actually born here in Ukraine.
Right.
I was born here in Vinnytsia, and I actually left to the United States when I was 6 years old. So I've been back and forth a few times, but I can speak, Russian and everything, fairly fluent.
Yeah, you can understand people, you can express your thoughts, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I understand English a bit more than I would say Russian, but again, I can still understand people and whatnot.
Right. So today I'm going to ask you some questions that I get from my students, and I get, myself sometimes, because I'm not a native speaker, so I still need some questions. First, confusing moments in English. Every time, this is what I used to think, and all English learners, they have this question: do Americans use all English tenses? So present simple, present continuous, present perfect, past perfect, past perfect continuous, etc., etc. So do you use all of them, or you only use 3 or 4?
I would say that we don't use all of them. Give me a few examples of what of a few tenses.
For example, we'll know that of course you use past simple, present simple, etc. What about like future perfect? Okay, so I will have done, or something like that. Do you use it? I will have done this.
We do. We're usually when people are talking, it's a little bit more simple than that. We would like to say, I would have done this, or I would have done that.
So not will, but would?
Yeah, I would have. We can always say I will have done this, but it doesn't roll off the tongue as easy as I would have done this, or I can do this later. I could have done this.
What about past perfect? Like I had it, or I had done it. Like would you use it?
Normally, I'd say we would use I would have done it, or I have done this, or I could have done this. So usually people talk. I know there's certain ways that grammar may not be correct. People like in America usually like to say things or say sentences that roll off the tongue better. That may not always be grammarly correct, but there are things that we can use and really can't use.
Yeah, and by roll off the tongue, you mean that it's more
fluent.
Yeah,
yes.
it's fluent to say.
Yeah.
Right. Talking about tenses, so I remember I heard this kind of question from Americans: what do you got? So basically it's wrong grammar, right? What do you got?
Yeah, that's again, it goes back to things rolling off your tongue or being fluent. We want to say more along the line of what do you have, instead of what you said.
Yeah, what do you got is not.
Yeah, what do you got?
It's more slang.
You can say what do you got, but it's nicer to say what do you have. It's something that's more fluent, sounds better.
What you've got.
Yeah,
also.
what do you got? I mean, that's fine, but you want to learn more along of using things that are more simple, and easier and more fluent. So what do you have sounds better than what do you got.
All right. Also, I noticed myself that sometimes some simple rules that are broken in English by American speakers, such as he don't know, or he don't speak, something like that. Though you have to say he doesn't, right? Or she doesn't. Yeah,
so the English language, or really, English is different in different parts of the world. So going off just the way that we speak in America, there's a lot of different ways that we can say the same thing. So it also depends on what zone you're in or what area you're in.
Right.
Whether you're north, west, south, or east. And
you're from Florida,
I
right?
am. So I am in Florida now. I live in Florida.
Yeah.
Some people would think that Floridians talk more Southern. I don't, because I've been in a few different areas.
You had a chance to compare.
Yeah. So I come from a few different areas, not just from the South. But normally people that are, say, from New York, and then people that are from upstate New York, they can tell, you know, if you're from New Jersey, even though you're in the same area, usually people can tell the difference by the way you speak and the way you use your sentences and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different ways that we can say the same thing, which can be possibly confusing to certain, you know, new speakers and everything.
Right. So this is what probably we need to mention, is that you are from one part of America. So you have 51 states now, right?
Yep.
So if anything, there may be some contradictions in terms of, you know, if we talk about other regions, Texas, North Carolina, and other stuff. All right.
Yeah, but obviously, so the best thing is to learn it the correct way, you know, and then if people want to use certain slangs or, you know, do it their way, they can do it their way. But the main thing is you have to learn English the proper and correct way first before you...
That's what I always teach my students. First, learn how should be learned, and then you can choose whether you use it right or not. So we know that there is some grammar that is used wrong, and it's fine, like what do you got, or he don't know, sometimes they use it. But one question, I mean not question, but this I haven't something, it's not usable, right? It's not acceptable. I haven't money, I haven't friends. You don't say it, right?
So there are a few people that can possibly say this. You're not supposed to do it that way though. Haven't or can't, it's really not a word.
Even can't.
Yeah, so or doesn't, or you really want to say I cannot do this instead of I can't do this. It may sound more fluent, and which is why people really do use can't when they're actually speaking. But the correct way is to say I cannot do this, or I cannot have that.
Yeah. But can't, right? Can't is something that is acceptable.
Yes.
But if you say I haven't money, this is something that you shouldn't.
Completely incorrect. Yeah, you can't say I haven't money. That's not even really. Nobody really uses that.
Yeah. I haven't done something, but I have no money. I don't have money.
Yeah. You want to say I don't have money, or I do not have money. Stuff like that.
Yeah, good. Another thing that confuses all of us as English learners is prepositions: in, at, on, etc. But since we have limited amount of time, let us talk about in and at. I know that even I have this kind of confusing moments, such as I'm in the cinema or I'm at the cinema. I'm in a restaurant or I'm at a restaurant. So what is better? Is it interchangeable? You can use both, only one?
So it is interchangeable. Normally you want to say I am at the cinema or I am at the restaurant. Okay, unless you're trying to be very specific. You can say I am in the cinema, but really nobody uses that. The proper way, the more fluent way, is to say I am at the cinema or I am at the restaurant.
What about school? In school, at school, the same thing?
Same thing. I am at school. I mean, some people will use I am in school. Okay. Normally, though, if you're saying in, you're technically saying that you are inside something. Okay. So if you are inside the cinema, then you can say I am in the cinema.
Right.
If you're just around the cinema, you technically cannot say I am in this cinema.
So like in the building.
Yes. Yep. So you want to say more along the lines of I am at the cinema.
Good. Okay.
So again, if you're trying to be very, very specific, then you can use the in as stating that you are inside a certain place.
Yeah, because I also heard that when we talk about public places, usually we use at.
Yeah.
So like at the bank, at the cinema.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's to wrap up. All right. Emotional and spoken expressions. For example, you know, because you speak Russian, we say, when there is a mistake or something, we say blin. right, or something like that. What would be proper English versions for that? I mean, those that we can, like, not curses, right? Something that is acceptable.
So obviously it's going to be depending on the area that you're in, and
right, of course.
it depends on how you can say it in bad ways. You can say it in good ways.
Let's say acceptable. Something
So
that you can use around, your parents.
Yeah. So normally the nice way is saying, "Oh darn."
Darn.
Darn. Yep.
And you spell it as
DARN.
Darn.
So darn.
That's something I haven't heard of.
Yeah.
I heard dang.
Dang is also
crap.
Crap. Crap is really not the
not
the nice way of
it's
saying
not the nicest,
it, but
right?
a lot of people will say crap, which doesn't really translate to something good.
Yeah.
So if you want to do it the nice way, you want to say darn it or dang it. That's really your two words, doing it the nice way.
I see.
Yeah, saying crap or damn it.
It's
not really nice. There's a lot of people that will use it.
Dang, shoot. I also heard shoot. Instead of shit. And I see. Okay. What about this? Very often when I'm trying to remember to recall a word, or some other students, they like to say nu, right? This is what we say in Russian, like nu and etc. What about English versions for that? I know that you can say well. What else? Like when you're thinking and you're trying to say not a word but something that leads you to a thought.
So what you can say, I mean, there's a few things. Well is one of them. Like, well, I do want to go to the bank. You can also say things like, it's right on the top of my head. I'm thinking, like I'm thinking about going there, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can.
Like also this, which is like just a sound.
Yeah, exactly. You can just do
Get some time.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. The other section is that idioms, right? Because we all learn some idioms, English idioms, and I know that they differ sometimes from British ones.
Yes.
But in general, how often do you personally use idioms?
So me personally, I like to keep things fairly simple. So I don't really use idioms that much. There's particular people that love to use idioms and use it all the time.
Depends on people, right?
Yeah. So it really does depend on people. I can't say that I really use it very often. So.
By the way, the word often. Do you say often or often? Because I heard two versions of that.
So it goes again. You can say it either way. It goes back to when I was saying you're going to hear certain words. The sounding of words are going to be a little bit different depending on what area you're in. Like, for instance, if you're in Texas, most people will say howdy.
Howdy, right? Which is like how are you? Hi, how are you? Something like that.
Exactly. So people will sound a little bit different in their words. So, I mean, you can really get into it and, say how a word is supposed to sound,
And how is it supposed to be? I mean, is there a standard version? No, right? You say often
really
or often.
Yeah, there really isn't, just because everybody, wherever they live, is going to think that's the standard.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so
that's probably the main dilemma. Everybody thinks that there is a standard version of English. No.
Yes, no, there really isn't. Just because English is
too popular.
Yeah, it's too popular. It's used in so many different areas. I mean, British English is way different than American English.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Australian as well. Irish. I mean.
Exactly. So
Scottish.
There's a lot of stuff that. Australians say in English that an American would probably not even understand, even though it's still English, but they're grown, they grow up in a different area, different society. They use different idioms and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that there's absolutely one particular way to do it. I do want to, say, I can't stress it enough that you really want to learn it the proper way, proper grammar, first before you start, doing your own thing.
Yeah, totally agree on the same page with you, idiom, right?
Yeah.
Okay. About culture, the difference, between, of course, we cannot grab everything, but let's talk specifically about girls wearing makeup. Okay, how does it differ from American and Ukrainian or European culture? Because
Yeah.
I know that in America, in the United States, girls do not wear as much makeup as here.
Yeah, so the cultural differences are pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, coming here, and of course, we're staying in Vinnytsia and even Kiev, and both these areas are a little bit larger than
Mm-hmm.
say some of the smaller regions. So I can't talk about the smaller regions, but
Of course.
yes, most girls here do wear a lot more makeup.
Mm-hmm. So it's
And
visible, right? You can
it's
notice.
definitely visible. They dress differently as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think that's definitely a cultural difference.
Mindset, right? We
Yeah,
think
different
differently.
mindset. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the way the society is
Mhm.
here compared to over there.
Mhm.
Of course, you do have bigger cities and
Right.
whatnot, like New York,
Of
Sacramento.
course, even within Ukraine it differs, right?
Yeah,
So-
exactly. Yeah, depending on the region that you
Mhm.
go. But just talking from the region that I live in,
Mhm.
which is in Florida,
Mhm.
Sarasota, Florida. Most, girls and stuff like that, if we're on topic of girls and whatnot, they definitely don't wear as much makeup. And I would say that they probably don't dress as nice unless it's for a special occasion.
Mhm.
Here it appears that even if it's not a special occasion,
We do worry about what others think. Not only girls, right? Boys as well.
Yeah. So I would say that the people here are definitely. I mean, I don't want to say bad things or anything like that. I am Ukrainian and everything. I did grow up here, but there's, I would say, a lot of pride.
Yeah, nothing bad. It's the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah.
In
yes.
general, if we take
So
it.
people here really want to dress very nicely to
Mhm.
show people that that they're dressed nice. I guess they have a lot of pride
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Not a bad thing,
But it's just different.
Yeah, it is different. So, like I said, in America, or at least in the area that I'm in, usually people only dress up like this on special occasions if they're going to the restaurant, stuff like that, not just to the store.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised when I was in California and I saw a man wearing pajamas in the grocery store. I was like, okay. So I mean, for me, it was totally fine, but I was really surprised by that. So you wearing pajamas in a grocery store, and nobody even points at him or her. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, so there will be people that do care. I mean, there is things that you can do and really shouldn't do. I mean, you don't want to go almost naked to the store,
Right.
in pajamas or and stuff.
The balance is supposed to be there.
Yes, but I will tell you one thing. So, and this is just from my opinion, just from what I've seen in other countries, as opposed to what's in America. When they say everything is bigger in America, it is true, and what I can say is American people, they're more about comfort.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very big thing. And when they say everything's bigger in America, that also really goes to show like comfort levels and everything. Like our bathrooms are bigger most of the time. Our washrooms are bigger. Our basically everything's really bigger, the roads and everything like that. And for somebody to really go to the store like in their pajamas, it's really more of like a comfort thing.
Yeah.
So people there really want to be comfortable. So it's not really, I wouldn't say it's not proper for them to be in the pajamas unless the pajamas are not very proper. You know?
So you're more about how I feel and not how other people feel about it.
Most people, yes. Not all. There is still people that are materialistic.
Right.
That want to show off what they have, but most of the people are not.
Yeah, good. All right. Since we are really limited with time, the last thing that I want you to kind of, I don't know, give a suggestion, recommendation, whatever, to those people who are currently improving or start learning
Yeah.
English. Okay, so what would you say? I mean, because you speak both Russian and English.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think, oh, English is too difficult, English is too easy, or something, I don't know, different kind of opinion. So what can you recommend?
So I've kind of mentioned this a few times already. The big thing is to obviously learn to do it the proper way. Learn how to speak it the proper way first before you start venturing off on your own and using your own words.
Because a lot of people do want to start with slang right away, and I'm saying that's not the best
yeah, that's
way.
not the proper way, because if you start with slang, then you're never going to learn it the proper way. You know, I've seen a lot of, you know, Russian, Ukrainian people that go to the United States and live there, and they could be living there for 10, 20, 30 years, and they still don't speak it the proper way.
And nobody corrects them. That's why they continue, and nobody will say a thing, and they think they speak properly, even though they don't.
Yeah, they think that they can speak, that they do speak properly and everything. But then there would be a lot of situations that they may go to the store, or they might go to a special place where, you know, of government. Yeah, formal
when you
place.
have to use formal language.
Yeah, where you have to use proper grammar and things like that, and the people there won't understand them.
Yeah, so there are some moments when we should speak we have to know how to speak informally and formally, and then you have a chance to choose.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for a good conversation.
Of course.
And yeah, we have to go. Hey, it's me again. If you think this video was interesting and helpful, please like it, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel so that you will not miss any new videos, and see you soon. Peace.